A very good afternoon to you all. I hope you've had your lunch. On behalf of the organizing and program committee of today's seminar, I warmly welcome you all to Tallinn University, and I hope that we will have an interesting and challenging day. My name is Helen Sooveli-Sepping. I work here as professor of environmental management and senior researcher in cultural geography here in Tallinn University. The seminar is arranged by Interreg Central Baltic project called Augmented Urbans, and we will have 3 planners forums like this. And the International Planners Forum will be followed by local workshop that will take place in Tallinn early next year, and then it will be in Estonian. This seminar today is co-organized with local partners of Augmented Urbans Interreg project, and they are Tallinn Municipality, Viimsi Municipality, and Tallinn University. Our seminar, as I said, is the first one in row, as the project just started in March. And the seminar will touch upon the pressing issues of urban development, conceptualizing and trying to find solutions to pressing issues such as urban resilience, participatory planning, and how to use technology to find synergies between participatory planning, urban resilience. And today we will have 4 keynotes, which will be followed then by the panel discussion, and the day will end up with a site visit to Telliskivi Creative Hub. But before we start with our first keynote, I would like to give a word to Päivi Keränen from the University of Metropolia, who is the leading leader of the Interreg project. So, welcome, Päivi.
Thanks so much, Helen. It is truly a pleasure to be here today and see all of you here. It has been a long process with Augmented Urbans, although the project itself started only in March, but even before that, in planning and preparation of the project. So now it's so great to be here together with you, both from Tallinn and the local partners from the area, but also with the teams from around the Central Baltic area. And I would like to take this opportunity to share a few words about the project itself, because of course it's the best project ever in the creation. So, Augmented Urbans, or Visionary Participatory Planning and Integrated Management for Resilient Cities, is what we are working together upon. And it's a 3-year project, which the activities will last until the end of 2020. And basically, our starting point for Augmented Urbans is that when you, for example, discuss about participatory planning, it can be difficult because urban planning processes are often quite long and they are quite complex. And for those of us who are not urban planners by training, it can be difficult to deal with that long time span. And our hypothesis is that when you can make things more understandable, you can visualize things better, then the quality of interaction and participation increases. And we believe that novel extended reality technologies can provide tools for this. And basically, within these 3 years, we set out to do 3 things. Co-develop and implement participatory planning processes, and while doing that, create integrated urban plans for urban resilience within our partner cities and municipalities. Simultaneously, we strengthen collaboration in solving the issues of urban resilience, both within the partner regions and in the Central Baltic area. And this Planners Forum is a great example of the latter. And of course, also to increase planners and practitioners' expertise of the extended reality as tool. And these are our partners on a map, so you can see that we are really spreading out the Baltic Sea and coming together to figure out these important questions. So please join us on our journey with Augmented Urbans here during these days at the Planners Forum, but also in the future events, both local and interregional, but also online. Thank you.
We have 4 keynotes, and I would like to introduce the first person talking, Stephan Barthel from University of Gävle and Stockholm Resilience Center. And I guess his talk will be the most important one in terms of conceptualization of the project itself, but not only, also setting sort of a benchmark. What is resilience? I don't know how many of you have heard the term resilience in terms of urban development, but this is a term not very known, at least in Estonian context. So what is resilience? Is it another buzzword, or can we do something about it? Stephan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So hello everyone, my name is Stephan Barthel and I'm currently starting up a new research program at the University of Gävle on urban sustainability. Today I'm going to talk about urban resilience building. I have a background in Stockholm Resilience Center and I've been working there for many years. So we're going to build urban landscapes on this planet for another 2.7 billion people, according to the UN, before 2050. How many of you get some kind of emotional reaction when you hear this figure? 2.7 billion people, new landscapes that not yet exists before 2050. That's going to take up space equivalent of France, Spain, and Germany combined. Simultaneously on the planet, we have shrinking cities. We have the Rust Belt in the United States. 70% of the cities in Europe are shrinking in terms of population, when the industries are moving over to Asia and Africa. And also, we are consuming more and more as human beings, which puts a tremendous pressure on this planet. I'm sure you have seen these hockey sticks figures before. It's the increase in population, increase in global GDP, increase in foreign investments, in urban population, and so on. There's a long list of indicators, and everything shows this hockey stick increase. And that puts pressures on what we called in Stockholm Resilience Center on the planetary boundaries. All of you have heard about the challenges with climate change, but that's not the only boundary for our planet. We have a tremendous loss of biological diversity on the planet. 40% of all existing species are threatened by extinction. So if we combine the environmental problems we face with this urbanization, I think we need to start to think completely new. And this is also done by hundreds of researchers every day in universities. And there's different discourses coming up at the same time. One is the socio-technological systems discourse that mostly comes up from technical universities. And they approach this by increasing efficiency, better accessibility, lower metabolism, save green space outside. And at the same time, we have the discourse on socio-ecological systems, which is about resilience building towards climate change effects, human well-being at the center stage, climate adaptation, and a heavy dose of urban ecology. You have probably heard about smart growth, which comes from the technical perspective. It's about the renaissance of the inner city, to build dense, post-car development, heavy investment in public transports, and walker-friendly. The problem with that is it happens and develops on the expanse of green areas in cities. This picture is from Istanbul, 2009. 9 persons died. The city of Istanbul grows with 250,000 to 300,000 people every year. And this is the rate of urbanization in Asia and in Africa. It's nothing unusual. And city planning cannot keep up, so the green areas are being lost. And when heavy rains come, the water have nowhere to go. So you get these flooding events. You have heard about them from Istanbul, Houston, New Orleans, Mumbai, and so on. So we need to think about how can we collaborate with nature to build urban sustainability. And this is the idea about ecosystem services. Nature for human well-being, not nature for its own sake, but how can we use nature to work for us, to build a good welfare system. This was the first time in history, 2005, when 1,500 ecologists around the planet were writing this booklet, Ecosystems and Human Wellbeing, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. You can download it for free on the internet. And they saw actually that 60% of all the ecosystem services on the planet are degrading. So we need to do something about that. And you can divide ecosystem services in renewable resources like fiber, food, and fodder, regulating ecosystem services like pollination, water retention, temperature regulation, cultural ecosystem services like recreation, health, and connectedness to nature, and supporting ecosystem services. And this has created conflicting spatial paradigms in urban planning. One side comes up with the compact city to build denser, more compact, to increase walkability, to decrease the use of cars and so on. And the other one is the socio-ecological city, to build the healthy city for the people living in cities. To see that green areas provides restoration from stress, fosters reconnection between people and nature, and promotes physical and mental health. What we are trying to do, we're trying to integrate these different discourses into one system. We call that socio-ecological urbanism. And we see the whole system as a living system, as a cell, if you like. And what you see in front of you, it's a cabbage leaf and the street network of Greater London. And you can see, if you look at it from this perspective, you can see there's some structural similarities between species or ecosystems evolving, creating structures, and what we do also as human beings. Because, after all, we are naked apes that lives on this planet. We are also nature. And if you look at it from this side, then you can start analyzing the city as an ecosystem. So this is when urban resilience or resilience thinking becomes important. Resilience theory started quite early, 1973, by the founder of the idea behind Stockholm Resilience Center, Buzz Holling. And I'm going to write this quote here. Resilience theory aims to understand nonlinear dynamics in natural systems, such as the processes by which ecosystems maintain themselves in the face of natural disturbances, fires, droughts, and floods. I'm going to explain a little bit, just walk you through what this means in reality from a real-world case. And this, one of the principles of building resilience is diversity and redundancy. And this is from a long-going case about studying coral reefs in the Caribbean. And starting from the top, going down, there is a system of grazers, like cows or zebras or whatnot, that graze. But in this case, these groups graze algae on the coral reef. You have different species of fishes, and you have other kind of species, that the black little dots there, that also grazers. And with time, the fisheries put strong pressures on the fisheries, fishing down not only the number of species, but also the abundance within each species, until one dominant species were doing the function of grazing. And at that time, there was a disease hitting, because there was so abundant of one species, a disease came and wiped out them all. At the same time, there was a coral bleaching event, because it becomes so warm. And it went from this kind of system, a healthy coral reef. You had the bleaching event, and after that, the coral reef could never come back. So this is kind of a new way of looking how ecosystems work. There's no balance in nature. There's different stability domains. So there's no guarantee that if you move one ecosystem to a completely different system, that it will ever come back. And Buzz Holling, he was studying a lot of different ecosystems to see how they evolve over time. And he saw that they often start in the exploitation phase. So when there's almost like bare ground, when early strategic species comes in and exploit the area. And then it moves into a more mature ecosystem, or it reads what he called the conservation phase. It's very high on energy and very high connected, but it's very vulnerable to disturbance. So it will be disturbed. Any system will be disturbed sooner or later. And that's okay. It's perfectly natural for forests to burn and so on. If there is potential in the system to reorganize. If there's no potential to reorganize, the system will flip to another state. And this organization depends to a large degree on what they call slow variables, structures, like landscape structures. In this case, if one part of the forest burns, if the other parts of the forest that don't burn, birds, bats, and so on, can bring in new seeds to the burned area. And there's probably some trees that survives. There are probably seeds in the soil that survives also the fire, and even can only flower because of fire. And then the ecosystem restarts anew. But if there is no support areas, then the system might flip to something completely different. So this is called slow variables, which is important for building resilience. So this kind of systems thinking is used to a greater idea in natural resource management, in protection of coral reefs, and so on. And in the literature, over thousands of papers has been written about this. And this is a synthesis of different principles that build resilience. And Maria Chevenius, she will probably send out this link if she has not already done that, where you can read this more carefully, what this is about. But it's 7 principles, and 3 of them has to do with the system, how the system works, and 4 is about how to govern or manage the system. So connectivity is one of those important principles for building resilience. Diversity in redundancy, that I showed you just now, very important, and slow variables. Those are 3 different principles for building resilience in the system. And to take care of that or manage the system, it's important with participation, polycentric governance system, learning, and complex adaptive systems thinking to understand how the system works. So I urge you to look at this. This is sort of boiling down just a few pages on several thousands of research papers. So when you start about going into how to build urban resilience, I think it's really important to start sort of understand what the urban system is. What is a slow variable, for instance, in urban systems? And one such variable, I think, is the urban form, the street network, for instance, and the network of infrastructures. This is something that will not change tomorrow or even in 100 years. Once you build the urban form, the street networks and the houses, they're going to more or less remain there. And if you intervene in that, you will create a new system. For instance, urban form shapes other urban processes that goes faster, social processes, economic processes, ecological processes. And there's already research that goes on in this area. There are architects and ecologists that go together and to see how pollinating bees use the street network. There's analysis how the street networks interferes with gentrification processes and also with social segregation, for instance. And there's also new research comes up dealing with another principle, which is participation. At least in Stockholm and Sweden, there is the processes of designing cities and city quarters takes forever. It takes a very long time, it becomes very expensive, and you have this citizens talk, local democratic talks for citizens to involve in a vision. So basically, most of the time, the vision is already created with fantastic colors. Architects have been putting down a lot of work on it. So you end up speaking about this vision. But in reality, it might be completely different visions. So we are thinking about how can you bring in the users earlier on in the planning process. But then again, we had this discussion in the boardroom. Is more participation always better? There are some things, perhaps, that the experts know about and the lay people don't know about. For instance, how species move across the urban landscape, what kind of urban forms create functioning urban retail markets and so on in the city, where there is pollutions in the city, air pollutions in the city, for instance. So there's expert knowledge that is needed, I think, when we create our cities. But how do we make them meet? The experiential knowledge, experience-based knowledge of the citizens, which is very important, has been used way too little in urban planning, I think, but at the same time keeping the expert knowledge. So this is a project, a Vinnova project that's on the way. It's about to create ecosystem services maps and using space syntax methodology, which is another GIS methodology, to learn where the most successful places are for retail markets to develop, restaurant, urban bus, so to say, and also impacts from noise and pollution. And then use PPGIS tools, public participation GIS tools, smartphone apps, and clicker data. See how people react to different urban landscapes when they move in and out to the different urban environments. And there's so much technology coming out now. You can measure sort of blood pressure, heartbeats, and stuff like that. To get a little bit better understanding, what kind of urban landscape creates well-being for people? And how can we use that knowledge from people when we design our cities in a much earlier phase in the planning process? So it comes in directly from the beginning, before the visions are created. And this is one experiential map of Stockholm, which is created by such methods. It's published in Landscape and Urban Planning. The stronger the color, the more data we have on that place. Red color is negative experiences, and green color is positive experiences. And it's the likelihood of having a good experience or a bad experience. What you see, you see big red dots. Your eyes immediately are drawn to the red. That is usually the case, and the red dots are very concentrated in space, whereas the green areas are quite spread out. And we have analyzed what is the reason for people not liking these areas. One area is around the central station of Stockholm, the other one is Slussen, and the third big area is Gullmarsplan. This is where people commute a lot. They use this as sort of a bottlenecks for traveling and commuting in Stockholm. But it's also areas of monocultures, like the central business district of Stockholm. There's no apartments, it's just stores and stuff, and workplaces. And this is what we found. Density has a very low impact on human experiences when it comes to residential population. But when it comes to working population, it has a huge impact. It's a threshold over which, where there are too many people working in the same area, people really dislike, at least in Stockholm, really dislike these areas. Distance to major roads, that is of course nothing new. People don't like noise and air pollution. We found a different threshold up to 300 meters when it's very important to be close to nature areas. But if it's more than 300 meters, there's something else that is kicking in. We don't know exactly what, but something else. And with water is about 300 meters also. A complete surprise to everyone, it was just an experiment, was to see if the ecosystem service of temperature regulation impacts on experience. That's invisible. That's a biophysical process. So huge trees and nature, when they evaporates, it lowers the temperature with about 1.5 degrees, and also it creates shade, and that has a huge impact on experiences. Something impossible, but somehow we can sense it. So we're learning a lot, the relationship between people and the city, and what creates the attractive city and not. So that knowledge is not really there. We still have to find that. It's still sort of going up to the North Pole and finding new stuff, because we're looking at a complex living system that is completely always under change, never static. But integrating nature for resilience building is still a huge challenge in architecture. Usually you see solutions like this. This is sort of one of the most highlighted areas in Stockholm. It's called Hammarby Sjöstad, where they try to integrate nature and also building dense, but are we doing enough? This is not really tested yet. I think we need to sort of broaden our horizon when we look for innovations. These are two pictures that are sort of use a similar idea, but they take the sort of solutions from completely different ages. One is from Norrköping in Sweden. It was built in the mid-1800s, and it's technologies for movement. It's 32,000 trees on a boulevard that you use for biking and walking. An excellent technology for movement across the city in Norrköping. The other one is a High Line from New York, Same kind of technology for movement, very climate smart, but also it creates ecosystem services in the urban landscape. I'm sure you know all about this, the High Line. But I also think we need to sort of look for the blue skies projects, new ways of thinking, completely new. This is a picture from the living bridges in India, where people carefully, over a long period of time, knit the roots together of the trees to create the living bridges. The tree is not only producing an ecosystem services, it's a living bridge. And it will probably stand there for a very, very long time. It's going to be very robust. It has some evolutionary evolved defense mechanism of the tree that's going to keep this bridge alive for a long time. So I think we need, in urban planning and design, try to find inspiration from completely different places. And for this project, I urge you all to learn more, to look at 100 Resilient Cities, which is a project from Rockefeller Center. There are 100 different cities in the world are making resilient strategies for the cities. And just to go in there and read what are the different challenges for each city and how they make strategies for that, I think that's a huge possibility to learn of how to work with resilience in this project. And lastly, if you're interested in principles of socio-ecological urbanism, just send me a mail and I can send you this book. We wrote it a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Yes, as we are recording the seminar as well, then we're using the microphones. Well, thank you, Stephan, for the first keynote. Do we have any instant questions right away? We might check the Padlet. I can maybe start with my question. Stephan, have the researchers also looked at the cost of this new idea of building up cities in a resilient way? How costly could that be?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to either of those questions. I don't know if they have looked into cost or what it costs. I don't know. Cannot answer the question, sorry. But I think that many cities already, of course, are doing this. Building flood protection, for instance, if they, in a reactive way. If they have experienced a lot of crisis to the city, they have probably reacted to it. And traffic jams, for instance, trying to build new roads to deal with that. So I think resilience is a very natural way of dealing with the world, if I would say. But I think now when we're entering the Anthropocene with climate change and by the loss of biodiversity, we're moving into a digital revolution. Maybe we have to look further into the future to start adapting to that.
Okay, we have two questions from the Padlet. And you see them also here. How do you comment on the UN climate change report that was published last week? How do societies and politics make radical turn towards meeting the Paris Agreement goals? Can you comment on that, Stephan? You can use that one.
Yes, that's a tough question. For the first question is the report. I think it was so good that the report came. It's very tragic, but for me it's no surprise. The surprise would be if we would make 1.8 degrees that target. That would be a complete surprise for me. Sorry for being pessimistic, but I think it's good that the scientists now, IPCC, comes up with this report. And the radical turn. I personally think that we will never give up our welfare societies, even if the air would catch fire. So I think the only way is to sort of trying to develop technologies that can keep the welfare societies while decreasing our metabolistic footprint on the planet radically. That's what I think. Sorry for not being more positive there.
Okay, and the second question, do we really need to think completely new? Maybe we need to back and not forward. Modernism also discarded everything that was old and embraced, advocated for everything new, for the new modern man. It's a question of expression.
Yes, I think that would be the only way to sort of reach the 1.5 degree target, is to back, but I don't think that we're able to back. That's the problem. I think in theory it's right to do that. Sort of start to live more off the land, decreasing our consumption, live with less property, less floor space, less welfare society in all kind of degrees, but I don't think that most people are willing to do that. Maybe in this room, I think that we have a good chance. If we were the world, I think we could do it. But there's many more out there, like Trump and stuff.
More questions? We have time for 2-3 questions.
I think that modernism must come into phase of modernism 2.0, not take away modernism. That's the question.
Any more questions? Anything else you would like to add?
No. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephan.